Hi, and welcome to our first video of Crema's first video. Hi, and welcome to Crema's first video of 2020. Can you believe it's a new year?
Mm-hmm.
I can't, Sean.
Hi, and welcome to Crema's first video of 2020. I'm Sean Connolly.
And I'm Nicholas Sudarth.
I'm Mary Carnes.
And today we're talking about themes we see happening in the design world for 2020 and beyond.
Designers discuss.
Today we're going to talk about three main themes for the future of design. The first is the growing awareness of the impact of our design decisions.
Secondly, we're going to be talking about how designers are now expected to be more cross-disciplined.
And lastly, the changes in device form factors and how we'll interact with them. So when we set out to kind of document some of the things we'd like to say today, the first category we had was like the awareness of our design decisions and the impact that we'll have on the future of design. That seemed a bit nebulous, so we've kind of broke them up into a past, present, and future state, like how we can learn from the past, what we're doing now, and kind of how we can apply that to the future. So I guess we can start with the past.
Yeah, we're seeing a lot of things like Apple understanding how negatively the kind of accessibility of mobile devices all the time on our person is having on our brains and just our bodies and our lives and our culture as a whole. And so even things like screen time being implemented so we can start to monitor that in our lives. They're realizing that some of these decisions made in the past to make technology so prominent in our daily lives is having such a negative impact. So they're providing some ways to kind of combat that. So I think it's really important for designers to be able to look on decisions in the past and understand how they negatively impacted our culture and our lives and see kind of ways we can start to combat that.
Yeah, and I think those steps like screen time, or I don't know, Google has something similar, but those are baby steps. And so they're a good direction, but you have to wonder, like, are they kind of holding back about how much they could really limit, right? The goal is still for us to use products and buy their products and things like that. So it's kind of interesting to know, like, maybe future generations will have like even further backlash and say that's not enough. We want simpler phones or something like that, which, you know, we can't foresee at this time, but it's kind of interesting to think about. So starting out with these baby steps, what that could ultimately turn into. When thinking about the present and what we're doing now, the way I'm thinking about it is, a big part of it is like the form factors that are going beyond just a simple slate phone and a desktop. CES is happening right now as we record this, and there's just a ton of concept foldable devices, the screens folding, and concept cars. Even Sony has announced a concept car, which is bizarre. Not incredibly bizarre when you think that just car companies in general are getting more into tech. But just because we can put a screen in a car or fold a screen in half, do we need to? They're really cool to think about now, and they're perfect for trade shows, which is exactly what they're doing, but it's hard to know how we'll incorporate those into our lives and the impacts that they'll have.
Talking about sort of the future, you know, thinking about what technologies we're going to be designing for in the future, and also taking a look at like how our future decisions will be affected by the decisions that we've made in the past.
Learning from the past, for sure.
I think that's really interesting, thinking about sort of design ethics, and when we're coming into something brand new, you know, just because we can do something doesn't mean that we should. Well, it's kind of hard to have a baseline of an ethic without sort of knowing how that's going to negatively impact. And if we don't know how it's going to negatively impact, it's almost we have to learn from mistakes and stuff. So I think that's good. I think that technology and design are starting to kind of have that baseline of ethics, and these are really good steps towards that.
I think one thing, thinking about the future, I want to make sure that myself as a designer, I understand what kind of change I want to impact on our world and our culture. And so that when I'm faced with those new technologies, new contexts to design in, I can make strong, clear decisions about, hopefully, the way that I impact the world. So I think just in 2020, we're going to see a rise of designers being called to be more responsible about their decisions and more careful and thoughtful. And I want 2020 to be a year where I really nail down how I see the possible change I could create and really hold to that every time I have a new design decision or question or problem that I have the ability to solve. So,
and you and I were talking a bit like where I think Crema works well as team and cross-team company. I think that helps being responsible, right? Where you're not a single decision maker impacting how an app works.
Right.
So I think working together as a team is really cool. And I think we're seeing a big push toward that collaboration and cross-disciplinary work.
Yeah, and I think we're all working in teams, like not one person is making a giant, huge change. Like it's a cultural kind of design thinking kind of step. So it seems like I don't have a lot of impact, but even the little tiny paradigms I put into place in my apps or the products that I'm working on matter a lot more than I think they do. So I think just knowing that the decisions we make do have impact, being able to kind of be aware of what that impact could possibly be, and then just looking forward and making sure we kind of know where we want to go in the future is pretty important.
So the second thing that we kind of decided to talk about today was the expectation and the growing expectation for designers to be cross-disciplined. In this sort of space, we've started to see, developers and sort of the expectation for them to become cross-disciplined. And I think a lot of different roles have started taking on this cross-disciplined mentality. But now it's definitely trickling down to designers to be cross-disciplined.
The concept of like open design is really, really prevalent right now, and working in teams rather than just an individual designer, having design systems, so a single source of truth that many different designers can work from, and collaborating is just huge right now. And I think being cross-disciplined, having an understanding of the different disciplines that you're going to be working with and the people that you're going to be working with is huge in being a really quality, collaborative team member.
Yeah. And like we're using the word like expectation, and I think that's the right term, and I think it makes sense because more than ever we have the resources to learn about other disciplines.
Totally.
And we're kind of encouraged to do so, right? When you see your peers doing it, or you see somebody who influences the way that you work or design, you want to be like that. So I think when you're in the industry like this and you're seeing the people that you really respect doing things like that and growing, you're determined to do something similar. So I think the resources are all available, like free stuff online all the time. Figma is a free tool. The tools themselves are helping us kind of figure that out. Where, for example, like Figma and Sketch now have like auto layout and smart layout tools that reflect the way Flexbox works for a developer. Something that I guess I hadn't considered until those tools were available to me. Kind of understanding those constraints and how that works on the design side going into the development.
I also think the way companies work, like agencies like Crema, we are very, very cross-disciplined, and like designers aren't siloed into, we'll work on this for 3 months and then we hand it off to the developers and we never see it again. We actually get to like walk with the developers through the process of creating the product. I think that lends itself so well to making us learn, I come up to barriers with dev design collaboration, and I'm like, I need to know what this means. I need to know my HTML and CSS. I need to understand what APIs, how they work and everything. So I think just being in an environment that's so naturally cross-discipline, and product teams are a perfect example of just really naturally cross-disciplined environments. So that's been huge to like really force us to get out of our comfort zone and learn those different disciplines. And it's a really good environment to be in to kind of grow in that. We have the perfect example of a cross-discipline designer right here with us. Nick started out as a developer, then strategist, now designer.
Now designer, yes. So that was one of the things that I've always loved about just this industry, is that all of the pieces kind of touch the different disciplines. And specifically when doing development, I always wanted to kind of try to develop in a way that really impacted the design. And so I wanted to make sure that whatever the designer handed me, I developed it almost exactly to that, which meant getting very creative in CSS and JavaScript. Not always what they handed me was something that I could develop. And so some of this cross-discipline mentality comes from that, in that designers really needing to understand the development process and the developers needing to understand the design process.
Yeah, it's totally not a one-way street.
No, not at all.
Yeah. So that whenever we are designing something, we are mindful of user experience, we are mindful of the constraints around the technologies in development, which are getting less and less every day.
Yeah.
So Nick is essentially the design unicorn that we all want to be in 2020.
I'm not a unicorn.
You're magical.
No, could I be Shadowfax instead?
Sure.
What is that?
He's magical.
Oh.
Shadowfax from Lord of the Rings.
Gandalf's horse. Okay. No big deal.
Well, anyway, yeah. So some of the tools that we have that kind of help this cross-discipline mentality, like Figma, DSM, Storybook, and Webflow, all of these things are sort of front-end design pieces that mimic and sort of mirror the way the development works. And so me as a developer coming in, I can use these tools pretty efficiently because a lot of the stuff is very similar to how I would code something. I won't lie, sometimes when I'm in Figma or in Sketch, I do just kind of want to like code something out real quick with like CSS.
Yeah, me too, totally.
Clicking all of the little drop downs and stuff. But most things are very similar. And so I think also when designers are very efficient in these other tools, when talking with developers can say, oh, hey, it's Flexbox, it needs to be justified center, et cetera. And then you guys know what those things are because you've seen those and touched those in these tools. And I think that using these sorts of tools really help designers to become cross-discipline.
Yeah, I think it gives us a great kind of common language to collaborate with. And then it also gives designers a really good idea of the context that their designs are possible to be actually developed in.
Right.
Like working in Webflow, it is essentially developing a website, and so you really understand like what that could possibly look like instead of just creating some fantastic CSS illustration that'll take a million years to complete or something like that. So,
but I will say real quick, and this may or may not make the cut, but companies like Figma and Webflow, et cetera, please name everything exactly what the CSS properties are. As a developer going in and using these, like sometimes the names are not the same, and so it does kind of make it a little bit hard when trying to do those things. But it is a little bit more user friendly for somebody who is not a developer.
One more thing about tools. I think that we're seeing all these different tools really even push the boundaries of that cross-disciplinary kind of realm more and more and more. And so I think that in the future, that's just going to keep going. Like, I think we're going to be expected to be good at project management and development, obviously, and all of these different strategy, all these different things, QA eventually. So I think the tools are also pushing us to learn, which is really good.
Yeah, totally. So I already alluded to foldable screens and screens in cars and things like that, but there are a lot more form factors than just that, right? We have traditionally just had our phones and our desktops, but there's also wearables, obviously. There's still, for whatever reason, hype around AR and glasses and things like that. Maybe Google Glass was a bit early for people to adopt that. I thought it was a cool technology. So it goes beyond just foldable screens and cars like that. So that's kind of this whole section is like, what do devices look like in the future, and what do they look like now, and how do we interact with them, right? There's augmented reality is also a thing that's popping up a lot. Both Google and Apple have their own development kits for that. Yeah, so what do you think that looks like?
I totally think that the glasses were way ahead of its time.
But did you like the concept?
I love the concept, but I think that it needs to be far more advanced.
It's back.
It's back.
It's back.
2023, guys.
And hopefully it will be what it needs to be. Some of these technologies that come out, I think, are like way premature, and I think that they need to wait until it is what it should be. And so we shouldn't be releasing things until it is what it should be.
I don't know though, because I think they're kind of these baby steps to this bigger cultural acceptance of that technology.
Yeah, somebody has to be the first, and it has to look stupid and be gaudy and expensive.
Then all of a sudden, 7-8 years later, everybody's gonna be wearing these. Seriously, like Apple's releasing their headset in 2022 and then their glasses in 2023. So this is huge, and they've released these kits, like you said, so developers, designers have already been playing with this technology. So the skill sets are there and ready to go, and I think this is gonna become a huge part of our daily life, and it's just gonna take over mobile phones. We're going to have all kinds of stuff going on.
I'm just hoping, I'm reserving judgment. I'm hoping it's not just another sort of gimmick put out. I really hope that when the re-release comes, that it is what it should be.
Oh, I think it is.
And so I hope so. We're talking about VR. I'm not a huge VR fan. I think that moving towards AR for some of these sort of VR experiences would be a better experience. So stupid example is I don't really want to play like a game in VR. I would rather play a game in AR with glasses on. We were kind of talking about
You don't like
this.
the isolating experience?
Yeah.
Yeah, we were talking a bit about how VR is sort of kind of reserved for these like full-on experiences, something that you couldn't have. You have these whole fictional worlds built out in virtual reality that you couldn't have overlaid in your current reality. And then we also talked about how VR maybe is sort of the standalone technology, but more how like AR can be implemented into our current day-to-day. So you see it already in these nascent forms like IKEA, or I think Amazon even has like a way to like overlay furniture in your room. And that's cool and it's super practical, right? It's not, you're not having a virtual reality experience of how something looks in your room. So these small things that integrate with our day-to-day, I can see those going into like cars, right? Heads-up displays in cars and things like that. So I think the way we were talking a bit earlier about AR is that like it just sort of integrates into things we're already doing, and it's not going to be this huge shift. But maybe the shift is that it just gets better and looks better and is more reliable.
Yeah.
I think people are just going to get really used to that kind of experience,
Yeah.
and it'll be really kind of smooth transition into it.
I think we kind of talked a little bit about how like the sort of parallel of 3D TVs versus high-res TVs, and how high-res won that out, and you can barely find 3D TVs anymore, mainly because they're basically we're taking what we already have and what we're already used to and making it better. And I think that that's sort of where, in my opinion, please tell me if I'm wrong, argue with me in the comments, it'd be awesome, about how AR is basically taking what we already have and making it better and improving upon that, whereas VR is kind of the sort of 3D thing almost, where it's kind of deviating into a different realm. And I honestly think that we're going to see the same sort of dichotomy, where we're going to see VR start to fall away and AR start to rise up. But that's just my own personal prediction and opinion. So
Who knows?
tell me if I'm wrong. It'd be awesome.
I think in all these different forms of technology, we've seen little tiny steps towards it being really normalized and acceptable and expected at this point. I think another one we're starting to see is gesture control with the Google phone. It might seem a little bit silly at first, but I think that people are going to get really comfortable and start to expect that in all of their different actual devices in the future.
Yeah, the way I think of it as being applicable is like, one of the reasons I just don't like screens in cars is because I prefer to just like look where I'm going and reach out and feel a physical knob. I think that's something we miss a lot these days. I would much prefer to scroll a knob than scroll through like a slider bar. So I think maybe implemented in a car, I can actually see that being pretty useful. Like, I don't know, what am I changing music or dismissing calls or answering calls? I don't really know what that looks like, but to me, it's really the interaction with like these screens in cars that really riles me up, more so maybe than the distraction aspect of it.
Yeah. And so you'd mentioned the little baby steps of technology to get to where we're going. And my hesitation for those specifically is that I kind of feel like a lot of those little baby steps are sort of just gimmicky and they kind of fall by the wayside. And this thing specifically with gesture controls, I kind of feel like this new wave of gesture controls is very gimmicky. Hopefully people will like it and will start to implement that more. But my only thing is again, I hope that it's what it should be. I feel like there's going to be a lot of room for error in bringing it out right now. For me, like it doesn't really impress me that much right now. I kind of feel like once we get to sort of Minority Report level gesture controls, like that's when I'll be like really impressed and want to adopt it myself. But I am sort of old school, like wanting to actually like touch physical things. But yeah, like Google, once you guys have sort of Minority Report level gesture controls, then I'll be on board. Yeah.
But maybe we'll have another kind of Google Glass experience where something comes out, it sort of fails in the market, and then 5 to 6 years later, it's back full force and people are ready to adopt.
Yeah, and I also think similarly to like voice control, I think that's huge with like ambient computers. I think it was probably a year or more ago that I think we did a video where we touched on like ambient computing, and I think it was 2 years ago, like somebody got us an Alexa for Christmas. And it just really freaked out my wife, and we threw it away. And then like days later, there's articles like, they hear everything you're saying, which we know, like your phones listen to everything you're saying, and tons of data is collected on you. But we didn't want this one extra device to do that. But when I first used it, it was like, I like add something to my calendar, Alexa, and it was just a really incredible experience. And I thought, this is the future of like interaction with devices. You don't have to look at anything, you just talk to it. But that's still, to me, like a ways off, but it's getting better.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you have to be okay with like the privacy aspect of it. Right. So, you know, as designers, I don't know what we can do, right? That's beyond that might be beyond our control, right? These larger companies that are doing things like that, like enabling us to have these awesome interactions. Like, I don't really know what the designers have any say over versus what the agenda of the business is. So, but I think voice control is similar to like gesture control. They feel gimmicky at first, but could seamlessly integrate into what you do every day, which doesn't require you to look at a screen, which I think is awesome.
Yeah, and even though we don't have a ton of impact in those decisions right now, it's good to be aware so that maybe someday we'll get into voice design or some design gestures or something like that. I mean, those are possibilities for the future. So kind of, and maybe this points back to knowing kind of what kind of change we want to make in the world, like understanding what could be coming around the corner, knowing the kind of impact we want to make and being able to make those decisions when that comes up.
Yeah. Full circle.
Full circle.
Whoa.
So basically that was our episode of Black Mirror. Scary.
This video's done.
That was great.
Nice. Thank you guys so much for watching another episode of Designers Discuss. Make sure that you subscribe and click the little bell so that you are notified whenever we put out a new video. And please comment down below. Let us know the trends or the themes that you see coming out in the future. Let us know where we're wrong. Let me know that I'm wrong about gesture control, or that you too want Minority Report level gesture control, because that would be awesome.
Who doesn't?
Yeah. Anyway, thank you guys very much. Have a great day.
Happy 2020.